We're now going to look at the seventh church that we have been discussing. That's the final church, and which is the church of Laodicea. Now, this was a city that was rich, and they were even able to mint their own coins. And the inscription on those coins made it evident that the Laodiceans worshipped Zeus, Asclepius, and also Apollo. And as a tradition, it was also that they worshipped the Roman emperors. Now, around 60 AD, there was a great earthquake, and the city was destroyed quite a lot. And the citizens, interestingly, refused funds from Rome to help rebuild and construct the city. They said that they were rich enough and they felt that no outside help was needed. Interestingly, we are going to see that this was almost a cultural norm even where the church was concerned. Another interesting aspect in the city was that they had an aqueduct. They received water from the mountains, and there's actually a source of hot water springs in that region. So what the people in the city did was that they directed the water for about 6 miles, and then they collected this water outside of the city. But by the time it came into the city, because of the heavy minerals and also not being able to maintain the hot water, basically the water became lukewarm, and it made it good for only like bathing and not even for human consumption. Now, the name Laodicea is constructed from two phrases: Laos, meaning people, and Dike, which means decision. So they were a people who really made their own decisions. And it seemed that they were a proud people as well. You know, they also had a medical school, and where people came for training, especially for people with eye problems and also with ear problems. The church itself was an egoistical, selfish, and materialistic church. Isn't it interesting that how the church can become like even the culture of a city if the church is not careful where it gets its inspiration and where the church's eyes, or whom the church's eyes are upon. And to the angel of the church in Laodicea write, the words of the Amen and the faithful and true witness, the beginning of God's creation. In every other letter to each of those churches, he was introduced using a specific character or a specific phrase that chapter 1 describes Jesus when John first saw him. But here it begins by saying that he is the Amen. Now, the word Amen literally means the trustworthy one, the reliable one, the true one, where there is no deception or lies. And the word Amen really actually comes out of the Hebrew. It literally means the true one. If you remember, even in some of the Gospels, when Jesus wanted to highlight a truth, he would say, I verily, verily, I say unto you. Or another translation is, I truthfully, truthfully say unto you. So Jesus here is firstly introduced as the one who is true and the one who speaks the truth. Then it says that he's the faithful one and the true witness, the one who sees and he declares things as they are. So he is the one who is truthful and honest and believable, and his witness is a creditable witness. And that's what John is pointing out here, saying that as he is the faithful and the true witness, what he speaks is the truth. The third way that Jesus is referred to is the beginning of the creation of God. He is the source of creation. We know in the scriptures that Jesus was the one who created the heavens, who created the earth. He's the one who took the Father's word and brought creation into being. So he is the source of creation, and it literally says go back to the source. When things go wrong, go back to the source, because he is the creator. He is also the creator even of the things that are around you. And when you are in error, it's always good to go back to your starting point, and that is Jesus himself. By him being referred to as the beginning of God's creation, his deity is being strongly ascertained in this moment. I know your works. You are neither cold nor hot. Would that you were either cold or hot. So because you are lukewarm and neither hot nor cold, I will spit you out of my mouth. For you say, I am rich, I have prospered, and I need nothing, and realizing that you are wretched, pitiable, poor, blind, and naked. So Jesus has some strong words for the church. And he says, I know your works. I see where you are at. I know what you are doing, because there is nothing hidden from his eyes. And he says, you're neither hot nor cold. And when Jesus says that, and when he says you are lukewarm, immediately for the Laodiceans, they would think about their water. Their water that comes from heat becomes lukewarm, and the water that is of no use to anyone. See, hot or cold, depending on the context, is good. For a person who is thirsty, they need cold water. For a person, who wants a cup of tea or a coffee, you need hot water. So depending on the context, Jesus is saying, I hope that, I pray that you would be either hot or cold, but yet you're of no use to anyone because you are lukewarm. That is a serious place to be in. It reminds me of even when Jesus says, if salt loses its flavor, it's just thrown out onto the ground and people just trample it. And as a Christian, we can have a name called we are a Christian. But if we are of no use to anybody, I wonder why we even exist. Because for this church, that's what Jesus was saying. He's saying, you're of no use to anybody because you're neither hot nor cold. He then goes on to say, I will spit you out. I will spit you out. Wow, that is so serious. See, for the ancient Greeks, they liked their wine hot or cold. And serving a lukewarm wine would be considered an insult. So, in the same way, if someone was served a lukewarm wine, they would take it into their mouth and they would spit it out because it's of no use to anybody. It had lost its effectiveness. And as a Christian, we need to always make sure that we are effective in our works, in our calling. And so Jesus says, when I come, I'm going to spit you out because you have lost that effectiveness. Another interesting fact about this letter is that Jesus gave them no affirmation of their faithfulness. There's nothing that he refers to and said, this is good or this is good. But he corrected their lukewarmness and their spiritual pride. See, one of the issues that the church was going through was that they thought that they had all the riches and they judged their spirituality by their material abundance. Never judge your spirituality or your walk with Jesus by the material aspects that you acquire. He says, you say that you are rich. He says, you say that you have no need. You say that, you have prospered so much that you have everything. But Jesus says, you have nothing. You have nothing. See, the moment we do not see the need of someone else, that is where our downward spiral begins. And here's a question I like to ask you. How many times do we judge God's faithfulness by our health and our wealth? And we can see that that is not a biblical standard, because God is faithful, period. And the Lord is rebuking these wealthy Christians, not because they are wealthy, but because they have substituted God for their wealth. Wealth has become their savior. Wealth has become their idol. And therefore, they thought that the more they had, or the money they had, literally was considered as, this is God's blessing and this is who we are, but their trust was on the materialism instead of the true and the living God. It's interesting, isn't it, how we sometimes look at our own self and we think, hey, this is who I am. But Jesus sees us in a different way. Because Jesus says, you don't realize you are poor, you are wretched, you are blind, you are pitiable, you're naked. And he literally speaks the opposite of what these guys were declaring them to be. And the way God saw them was not the way that they saw themselves.